can of petrol caught fire, created a wall of fire in front of me, so I was trapped in a garage with no way out. I had this crazy near-death experience where I was like talking to voices that felt like that they were ancestors past. There was no air ambulance overnight in Ireland in 1992, so I had to do a 4-hour journey across country. My mum was in the front. I think I flatlined twice on the way. I'm severely allergic to penicillin, and it was written all over my file. I think you know what's coming next. Someone administered penicillin to me in a hospital. There were mistakes made in operations. I got addicted to morphine then as well, and it was the first time that you'd see strangers walking past and kind of looking. And went back to school in January of 1993, and that day I think was the single hardest day of my entire life. And I rang my mum on the way home. I think I was on the M1 or something, and I said to her, like, I'm ready now to do that. She goes, "Oh, son, I've been waiting for this phone call for like 20 or 30 years."
Marc, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You've got a, very interesting story for sure. And you've obviously gone through quite a big level of trauma. Can we start at the beginning of your journey, and then you can kind of tell us what happened and how you got over that and what you're essentially doing today?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the real start of the interesting part of my journey was when I was 14 years old and suffered severe burns in an accident. It was 1992, so over 30 years ago now, and I was on holiday in Ireland, and very cliche, kids don't play with matches, and that's what we did, me and a cousin, and it was a really, really bad rainstorm, a lightning storm that night, so just at the end of us playing, we went into a garage to get away from the rain, and a can of petrol caught fire, created a wall of fire in front of me, so I was trapped in a garage with no way out. My cousin luckily got out the other side. I was never on fire, but the garage was burning around me, and I passed out. And I was in there actually for a lot longer than I thought. I only found that out this year, that it was a long time that I was in there. I had this crazy near-death experience where I was like talking to voices that felt like that they were ancestors past, and made a decision that I was going to live like within that moment. I was in a very, very peaceful place, and then as soon as I made that decision that I decided that I was going to live, I was like snap, immediately awake in this burning building around me, like instantly on my feet, and there was this small little window.
You woke back up in it.
They
Wow.
still hadn't got me out. This was rural Ireland, and maybe because there was lightning storms going on that night, and my family couldn't get hold of the emergency services, so no one came to our rescue. So like panicked family members, extended family members.
And at this point, you're covered in all burns.
I'm just black with soot, but I was never on fire. It was just a burning building around me, and I don't know if it was a crazy burst of adrenaline or something else weird happened, but I just managed to just fly out this little window, this shattered window, and I only got one little nick on, like little scar on my ankle to show for it. So I was out then, and I could hear, he's out. So someone shouting from the front of the building, because I think one of my cousins had already gone in the shower, put towels around him, and was coming in to try and find me, because he told me this year is that it got to the point where in his mind they were worried that they wouldn't even find a body, let alone find me alive. And another cousin said to me, is like, we still don't know how you managed to get yourself out. Anyway, I was out. My uncle made some really critical decisions, again, that I only found out this year, in terms of hosing me down, putting me in wet towels, and then driving like a lunatic for 12 miles through rain and storms and crazy driving to get me the 12 miles to a local hospital.
Is that what you're meant to do in those situations?
Yeah. Luckily, he was a secondary school teacher, primary school teacher, head teacher of the local village primary school. And it happens, I think that year, gone on a health and safety course. And there was one moment within that course where they said, none of you are probably going to ever have to use this information. But if you ever do have to use this information, then
This is
save,
what you got to do.
It could save someone's life. And he told me this year that something in him just made him pay like really, really close attention, where some of the other people in the course weren't. And it was to do with if one of your students suffers severe burns. So he knew in that moment what to do, to hose me down, to wrap me in wet towels, to not treat me, not try and put any ointments on, do nothing like that.
Were you in a lot of pain?
Yeah, like unbelievable amounts of pain. The journey to the hospital, which my uncle said was like, the worst period of his life, was pain. Like, I mean, it's even beyond what you could ever imagine. It's like, it's just not even in any of our consciousness. So that was pretty horrific. Getting to the hospital.
I'm surprised you ended up even being conscious, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm weird why I thought about that this year. Why I didn't black out. Pain so much. But and I do remember this, but it's been repeated to me. I was so worried that my cousin was going to get into loads of trouble because there was the two of us, and I was like, and I think I had that moment. It's like, I'm not going to make it here. This is beyond.
This is it.
And so apparently I was and I think that gave me focus to stay conscious. I was just like, don't blame Brendan, don't blame Brendan, don't blame Brendan, like all the way. But in a weird way, I think it was almost like a chant. It was a distraction for me. And I managed to walk part of the way into the hospital when I got there, and my mum saying, oh, your uncle's going to carry you in. And I said, no, I'm too heavy. And I started to walk up the steps myself. And then I think my uncle just picked me up anyway.
Yeah.
Put me on a trolley. And then I was into a side room and I was just screaming at them to knock me out. I was like, just knock me out, knock me out, knock me out, knock me out.
What do you reckon it was? Like the adrenaline of like you was...
Yeah, it must be. Yeah, it was that adrenaline, that just whatever it was. So then I was unconscious. They spent 2 or 3 hours stabilising me there. They were already on the phone to... the newly opened burns unit in Dublin, St James's Hospital, and they had a consultant, like an open line, and the A&E doctor at the Castle Bar Hospital was like, you keep this line open, don't you dare put the phone down, and demanded an open line, so that, because he didn't, this was beyond anything that he's ever had to deal with before. But they managed to stabilise me enough to get me in an ambulance. There was no air ambulance overnight in Ireland in 1992, so I had to do a 4-hour journey across country. My mum was in the front. I think I flatlined twice on the way. They stopped, saying that they were just changing my drips, didn't tell my mum what was going on in the back. So I got there, got to Dublin, then I was in an induced coma, came out of the coma.
How long were you in a coma for?
I don't know, there's differences of opinions at the moment in timelines between the memories. Just over 30 years ago between my family members. In my head, I had it that I was in for 10 days and then came out of it. But I'm severely allergic to penicillin, and it was written all over my file. And I think what's coming next. Someone administered penicillin to me in a hospital, which meant I had to go back into a induced coma. I think for another week. My auntie thinks it was less, but I mean, it's
what did it feel like to be in a coma? Like, is it like you close your eyes and you wake up again?
Yeah, they were there because it was an induced coma. They're basically, you're just heavily sedated. So there were some moments where I was vaguely conscious that I was in a space, and that there was a moment actually that there was a lot of family members in the room at the time, and Linfa Christie had just won gold medal at the Barcelona Olympics, and I was a really big runner, like before my accident, loved athletics, and I heard that, and I lifted my arm up, and apparently me just doing that just gave everybody a massive lift. But yeah, you're kind of a little bit, but then I was out of the coma, but still had assisted breathing for a while. I guess my lungs were quite badly damaged. My eyes were covered up as well because I thought I was going to lose my eyesight. So my forehead was really deeply burned, like almost back to the skull. So they were really worried about my eyesight. I think one by one my organs almost packed up, but I kind of fought them off. And then I remember having that tube down my neck, and that's a weird feeling, like a machine breathing for you. Then that got...
What do they do? They put a tube all the way inside
your
lungs?
just like a ventilator. So I don't know how far down it goes. But I remember that coming out, and I was like, oh, it's like a weird feeling.
A long tube,
Yeah, and but then I still had patches over my eyes. But then, yeah, great news was when they took it off, miraculously my eyes were absolutely fine, not damaged, at all, which was huge. And then it was just 2 months, I think, before I was well enough to get back to England. And in those 2 months, 3 operations, but every single operation just kept getting cancelled and delayed, and it was horrific. I think the third one, I think it got cancelled 3 times, and on the third time I'd been nil by mouth and water for 14 hours, and I was being given the pre-med, and I was on the trolley outside the operating theatre, and there'd been some big accident in town or something like that, and it was an emergency, so they cancelled again. And at that point, my uncle, kind of like enough was enough, and I think he knew someone in the government, in the health minister or something like that. So he didn't want to do that, but he made a phone call.
Yeah.
And then the next day I was back in, and then there was no cancellations. But they were a very inexperienced burns unit, so they were still learning their craft. So I try not to be too kind of critical of some of the mistakes that were made. There were mistakes made in operations. I got addicted to morphine then as well, and then I had to go cold turkey off morphine.
What sort of mistakes were?
So they thought they were trying to save my fingers by doing certain incisions in certain points, and they did it on the wrong side, and no, I didn't end up losing them, but I got way less functionality than maybe I would have had if they didn't do things. Then they got me, probably gave a 14-year-old too much morphine, and I got addicted to that, and then I had to go cold turkey from that. My mum refused to leave my side for 3 days. I think she slept 4 hours in 3 days.
How long were you on morphine for?
I don't really know exactly, but I know it was about 3 days, 4 nights of withdrawals, where I was hallucinating like crazy, and my mum was pacing up and down the corridor for me. And then I was having these daily dressing changes, which was like 2 hours of absolute torture. They dropped me into this big, massive bath, like salt bath. It was like torture. And when I got to England...
What, was it really painful?
Like really painful.
Getting in and out of the salt bath?
Yeah, and just peeling off, 38% of my body was burned, and every single day they're changing the dressings on that. And you imagine it's stuck to you, and it was just horrendous. And I got huge anxiety from that. My mum remembers me coming out, and immediately I'd be anxious about what was coming up 22 hours later. But it's weird though, because I look back specifically at that, those going through that is like took my pain threshold to another level. But also in dealing with anxiety, it was like, I can't live if I'm going to have this level of anxiety. So I've got to figure out a way to get around that. And I've been very, very lucky that I've experienced so little anxiety in my life. And I really trace it back, like many of the things that I went through, to those moments that, I had like extreme doses of so many emotional states at such a young age that, they can either make you or break you.
Yeah.
And luckily, for multiple reasons, they made me.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. It's weird. I look at it.
So you're basically saying through all of that trauma, it really increased your threshold. So you kind of really helped you with perspective later on in life when you were going through things.
Yeah, mentally and physically.
Yeah,
my pain threshold is just on another level, and as you would expect, but also mentally in many different things in terms of a lot of depression, anxiety, a lot of the things, overcoming trauma, bouncing back, resilience. All these things were kind of, excuse the pun, like forged within me in those early times, for sure.
Yeah, it's quite incredible how like these traumas can really give us a gift later on in life.
Yeah.
To use in different ways, but it's really hard to see that at the time. And
oh no, exactly. I'm very aware that sometimes sharing my story that I'm looking back through rose-tinted glasses at certain things, and often it was probably like way worse than I can ever explain. But I'm happy with that. That means I've got to a place where I'm remembering the things that have helped me go on to lead an incredible life. And whatever's happening within my psyche, there's probably a lot of things that I've forgotten that would probably, stir up some trauma. So, and that's just part of the recovery process. I'm not in any way directly comparing this, but it's why women have, go through childbirth again and again and again. If they were to remember some of the painful horrors of childbirth, then they might not go through it again. But your body, floods yourself with hormones, and you forget so much of the hard stuff. And I think that, I think in a weird way, was like, I think happened to me as well.
I think the thing with that is the good outweighs the bad. Like having a child probably far outweighs the pain that you actually have to go through at that.
Yeah, that's true. But,
I don't think I'd like to find that out for myself. But so what happened? So you were on this recovery. You were still quite early on in.
Yes, I was still in Dublin, but my parents realised they needed to get me back to London as soon as possible. So it was all about that. My mum at the time was working in a local private hospital back near home, so she had contacts with doctors and consultants. So she made some phone calls and said, look, where do we bring Mark to when we bring him home? And they were like, John Clark, you need to go to John Clark. And he was this Mr. John Clark, because he's a consultant, kind of pioneering burns surgeon, based in his own unit in Roehampton in southwest London. And so phone calls were made to there. And I like, will you take Mark in? Because I could have gone to East Grinstead, which is the kind of famous one that was set up during the Second World War to deal with pilots. But they said, no, John Clark's the best in his field. So made some phone calls there, and they're like, yeah, of course we'll take him. So then it was like, okay, just getting me to the point where I could get on an Aer Lingus flight. I still had to get a commercial flight home. But I had the VIP treatment, the ambulance, like right up to the bottom of the steps, getting on board. But that was like a weird experience, because I've been in this bubble of this burns unit, and now all of a sudden, and it was the first time that, you'd see strangers walking past and kind of looking and
what were you, were you wearing all your bandages?
Yeah, I was still like bandaged up at that point, and got to Roehampton, and then that's really when my like intensive recovery started. So the thing with John Clark, Mr. Clark, is that he's very much the old school, very blunt, and he tells you how it is. And we clashed, but we got on brilliantly. Like, our personalities just meshed really, really well. And but yeah, he pulled Mum aside and said, he's in a right state. I don't know what they did over there, but like, he's in a right state. Like, we've got a lot of work to do. And then come and talk to me. He's like, are you ready for this? Like, we're going to have to really go for this. Are you with me on this? And,
it's quite funny how like he was quite blunt and you guys clashed, but
in a good way.
In a good way, yeah. So it's like we struggle to kind of like hear the truth, but it could be absolutely necessary for all the right reasons.
Yeah, I demanded the truth, and I made a conscious decision when I got to London. It's like, I'm going to start taking charge of my own recovery here. I was very as a kid before it, very sort of competitive and gritty and stubborn. I think also had a good humour and empathy, but I was like a live wire of a child. I had all these kind of attributes that would probably make me just as adorable, but also just as annoying at times, because they had all these, characteristics.
Were you always quite optimistic, or?
Yeah, I think I was. But then, you have ups and downs as kids. Anyway, but one thing that drove me mad in Dublin was so many people having conversations around me when I'm in a room, and I'm like, I'm here. And it was an old school ward that was like, almost like, you're a child, speak when you're spoken to kind of thing. And I was like, so I was having none of that. And I don't know if this was with hindsight as well, but trying to take a little bit of the burden off parents, especially my mum, who became our primary carer.
How did it affect her?
She just gave up a job, became a primary carer. She's an incredible woman, like unbelievable amounts of empathy, but really resilient and strong within it as well.
It's amazing.
She's a remarkable woman. But yeah, so like say that, you know, Mr. Clark came in and he was just like, are you ready for this? Like, we're really going to have to, if you want any quality of life going forward, we're going to have to just go for it. And I was like, okay, I got no choice really, bring it on, I think. But yeah, I'm so glad I didn't realise what he meant, because I think I'd had, you know, another 17 operations before the end of the year. So in 3 months, you know, the first week is Operation Monday, Operation Wednesday, Operation on Friday.
God,
it was full on, intensive. But you just, you know, take one battle at a time, and then you move on. And it was really great getting out of the ICU ward into the children's ward, down the other end of the hospital. And it was just these little breakthroughs, and you start creating targets. And
today I need to try and do this, and then
but I was setting bigger targets as well, in terms of trying to get back to school. So everyone around me was like, well, it's just, obviously he's going to drop back a year, right? There's no way, like look at him. It's like, you know, how's he ever going to get back to school? And my right hand was so badly damaged that I couldn't write with it, and I wouldn't be able to write with it for years. So they were like, you can't even write with the hand that you write with. How are you going to go back to school?
So you weren't worried about like going to school and like how people would treat you?
Oh, no, I was, but no, I didn't really think about that at the time. But mine was just like, I just got super competitive about everyone just assuming that I couldn't stay in my school year. But you know, when you're 13, 14, 15, the year below you seems super young, and the year above you, they seem really old, right? So mentally, I knew inside of me that it would destroy me, and I had this resilience and this positivity, and but it was so much that it was a line that I have to stay. If I drop back a school year, I might just give up on my education. I'll be mentally destroyed. It might send me on a downward spiral. So I knew inside myself that staying in school and staying, you know, starting of GCSEs as well that year, that I had to do it. And when my mum and the community there that was there realised that I wasn't going to have it any other way, they were like, okay, we'll go to battle for you. We'll make it happen. We'll convince the school who think that you can't come back. We'll talk with the local authorities. We'll see what support we can get. And everyone just, and it was, as I said, it's like what I learned about leadership in adult life. So much of that was formed in that moment. It was like I was CEO of my own recovery,
destiny.
And my mum was my MD, and then I had a board of directors with Ruth, the community nurse, and then my family members. Dad was probably the financial director who made sure he kept the home running. My mum had to give up work
because I do think that's absolutely incredible at your age to know that this is what you kind of wanted for yourself, and this is what you thought was best for yourself at that period of time.
Yeah.
And that your parents gave you that opportunity to pursue that as well.
Yeah. Maybe they, just that he's got this fire, again, sorry, excuse the pun, fire lit within inside of him, so they made it happen. And I was also, fortunate that back then the NHS was so much better funded than it was now. And there was a school within the hospital. So for a couple of hours in the afternoon, I was able to go there, and whenever my left hand wasn't wrapped up in bandages, I was learning to use a computer, so I could use word processors, so I could help with that, because that helped with coursework and stuff later on, and just start to practice writing with my left hand. But the weird thing is, I think I was naturally left-handed. So there's this funny story when I was, because I'm left-footed. I always played pool and snooker left-handed, brushed my teeth left-handed, but I wrote right-handed and had the worst handwriting of like all my siblings. I'm
both as well. So
how are you?
I'm left-handed, and then I have to use my right for some things as well. Yeah, it doesn't feel. So yeah, it's a bit.
But I was, my mum told me this funny story. I was 2 years old, and I was sat on the carpet of my older sister's class in primary school, and a teacher, she was also a nun, saw me using my left hand and went up to my mum and said that left-handed people are really disadvantaged in society. You've got a couple of years before he's going to come to the school. By the time he comes to the school, make sure he's right-handed. So every time he picks up a pencil or a crayon in his left hand, take it out and put it in his right hand. So my lovely mum, being, this
really, is that what they said to you?
innocent, young mother from the west of Ireland, was like, well, okay, well, you're
Yeah,
a
we've got
teacher,
to make this happen.
you know best. So that's what happened. And I always had terrible handwriting, and there's always like a disconnect between what I was writing down from the board and it's just it's because I wasn't naturally right-handed, I don't think.
Yeah, wow.
But then obviously it would have been easier if I was always left-handed because I wouldn't have to learn. But I think I picked it up quicker than I would have done. And
Have you got use in your left hand, or
pardon?
have you got use in your
Use.
left hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. So have you practiced writing with it in the part, even now, or?
No, well, I now I can write both hands.
Both hands.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story about how a bit later on in my journey about how I then started using my right hand again. But yeah, I started using my left hand, and then I went back to school part time in January. So just 6 months after my accident, I was still having tons of treatment, but the real glut of the first early operations had been done. So now it was a lot about physiotherapy and rehab, and then the operations were saved for half term, Easter, summer. So I had my midweeks off. So I went back to school in January of 1993, and that day I think was the single hardest day of my entire life.
What happened?
Just purely because of the all boys school, very masculine, very sporty, and they're your peers, right? And by that point, I'd been fitted with this clear Perspex mask that I had to wear 24 hours a day for 2 years to put pressure to stop the scar tissue on my face rising up. So I had pressure garments all over the rest of my body, but you can't have that on your face, otherwise you look like the Invisible Man. So I had to have this clear, which is not a huge amount better, but it makes you look intimidating, and kids, you think kids can be cruel, so you're worried about all that sort of stuff. And so yeah, that first day back, it was just that was tough, but I got over it, and the school were incredible.
Did you get over it quite quickly?
Yeah, I did.
Did you?
Like, strangely,
Yeah.
And I think this is
impressive.
This is part of I'm very lucky a character trait that then part of the resilience. I get over stuff quite quickly and then move on. And I realised that I was untouchable as well. And I think
You was
untouchable in school. So if anyone even said anything towards me, they were like, I knew they'd all been warned, like, we're going to expel you.
Right. Okay. So you had a lot of support around you,
and incredible friends. Like I had 3 or 4 or 5 friends around me who were just like my henchmen, and it was and I just thought, I've got a bit of power here. And I've always had this,
you
like,
became a kingpin
personality and this quick wit that got me in trouble, like, before the accident, because my mouth would speak before my brain would engage. And but now I could, like, anyone that would, like, give me a thump on the arm before, I could, like, take the piss out of them, and know that they would just couldn't do anything about it. So I gamified it a bit and did that. But I was still having physio 4 days a week, so it was very, very part time, and operations every holiday. But I was just determined not to drop back a year. So I was very, very focused, and the work provided a great distraction from everything else that was going on. So yeah, I got to my GCSEs, and I had a class helper there next to me, and they said, "Oh, do you want to type it? Do you want, transcribe it?" And the plan was going to be that I transcribe, and then I get into that first exam, and I wish I'd practiced before. It's like, it's so hard to transcribe what you want to write. If you're trying to write, a story or an essay or something like that, it's really difficult.
And transcribe is what exactly?
So like
you got
talk, and then my helper would then write out what I'm saying.
Yeah. So you got to know how to articulate yourself.
I know, but 10 minutes in, I was like, this ain't going to work. And I was like, just give me the pen. And that was the first time that I'd written that amount of time, like left-handed. My hands were just aching after 2 or 3 hours or whatever it was. But I got through it, and I was like, wow, you managed to do that. And I think I ended up taking 6 GCSEs, and I got 5 of them. So I mean, I got the minimum that I needed to go into A-levels, and I think that's the proudest I've ever seen my mum. We were thinking about all going into school to get our results, but then one of our best mates went to another school, and he wasn't allowed, so he had to wait for the post. So he said, no, we're all going to do it together. We'll wait the next day. So rather than getting them on a Thursday, wait till a Friday, get them in the post, and we'll open them together. But someone from the school saw my results and got so excited that they rang my mum on a Thursday, and then my mum told her, And then this is before, you know, mobile phones and stuff. I was out with my mates and stuff, and she was just going around trying to find me, going to different people's houses, calling up, and she kept bumping into people, and then she couldn't help telling them. So I think half our village knew my GCSE results before she finally found me and said, "You got to come home. You got to come home." And I'm like, "What's going on?" "No, please come home. It's good. Come home." And I got home, and she'd already bought a cake and the card, and she was like, "I just don't know how you've done it, but you've done it, and you know you've managed to get a B in maths." But I was really annoyed because they made me take the maths as my best subject, and they made me take the intermediate grade rather than the top grade, because you could get an A star, an A and a B, but they didn't give a C, then it was a fail. And they were like, "Stop worrying about A's and A stars. You just got to pass this. Think about your A levels." And I remember taking the exam thinking, this is just piss easy.
Really?
And I think I managed. I think I got like over 90% in it. But anyway, I got my GCSEs, and I said going back to school was, you know, the toughest day of my life. I think the proudest day or the proudest decision I've ever made was then to leave the school I was in. So they had a really good sixth form college. It was a really good school, but I felt like that. So once I was kind of confident getting my GCSEs, my next goal was university. And for me, it was not just about continuing my education, but it was about getting my independence back. So there was a 3-stage really recovery. For me, it was survival to start with. Then it was getting my dignity back because I just lost it all. You know, everything had to be done for me, and it was just. And then thirdly, it was getting my independence back. And for me, that meant being able to live independently on my own and go to university. And I knew at John Fisher, I told you before, my school, that I was untouchable, and I was wrapped up in cotton wool, and it wasn't
healthy. It wasn't a good reality.
It wasn't a good reality in the long run, and I knew that would continue.
Why is that? I can kind of like understand, but from your point of view,
why did I want to leave that environment? Or
why wasn't it a good reality for you? How did that affect you?
Because I felt like that if I was going to go to university, and I'd seen my older sister struggle a bit in her first year, you know, adjusting to life at university. But she also went to university straight after my accident, so she had to, you know, be taking them on her dad. She didn't have a mum there. I'd taken up resource, and I was like, the step up for me is going to be too big to go from this very, very safe environment all of a sudden to move to a different city and live on my own.
You knew that
jump's too big, and I knew that, and I was like, I need to do some growth. I knew that I was probably becoming a bit immature because I wasn't having the usual experiences that teenagers were having, because it was school, surgery, rehab, you know, and I thought I need to face up to this now. So I came back one day and said, I want to leave. They're like, "You can't leave. Don't be silly." I was like, "Okay, I'm leaving. You're going to have to get on board with this, Mum and Dad." And eventually they did, and we went and looked at local colleges, and I ended up going to a local mixed sixth form college that was vibrant, you know, and multicultural and vibrant, and I rocked up there, and I was still wearing my plastic mask. So, but my two best mates left John Fisher with me. They came with me.
I'm just curious to know, how did you? I obviously asked you about your mum. How did it affect your dad, or was your dad quite supportive of this?
He was, but in a different way. You know, they fill in each other's gaps very well. You know, my mum's the emotional, you know, compassionate, you know, good communicator, really good people person, always there. And my dad is, you know, very moralistic and hardworking, and you know his job. But I mean, he had a difficult childhood, and I think that just stunted his emotional development in certain ways on how to communicate. So he would show it in different ways, and he kept the family together because he had to go out and work 7 days a week, you know, to keep us going.
I can't imagine what it would have been like for a parent to see their son go through this.
Yeah.
By the way, so it must have been quite not only difficult for you to process. All of this, but for them as well at the same time.
Big time. And again, I'm not sure if this is hindsight or I was thinking this at the time, but you know, when someone suffers trauma, they don't very suffer in isolation, right? And I go back to the leadership qualities I had, and I had to be as good a patient as I could be, and I knew that the more I can make their lives easier, the better our team and the better my recovery would be. And that's, I think, where my personality came into it. You know, I still am, like, incredibly cheeky, and, you know, got this sarcastic sense of humor, and we had just loads of fun moments as well. So it wasn't all darkness, and, you know, and the whole time you start to appreciate different things in life, and the small things and the little wins and the beauty of nature and little interactions and making someone's day and giving a compliment. And I think that just grew within all of us. You know, we all just started to appreciate life a lot more. And I think my parents and their parenting style certainly softened. And I think rather than it being a bit old school Irish, it became a bit more collaborative, which was nice. And my dad dealt with it in the best way he could. You know, he internalized a lot, but he showed his love and his commitment to just, you know, working his ass off to keep the family together. You know, we had 2 older siblings at university, and then it was also a recession going on, and then he got made redundant from a job that he'd had for 17 years, and he could have got down about that, but he just went out mini cabbing like every night. Yeah. So my mum would be using the car to drive me to physio in the day. We'd come home, he'd go out mini cabbing at night. My parents then lost their parents in a 4-month period as well, so we had to deal with the grieving of losing 3 grandparents in 4 months. So all this was going on, and looking back now, it's like not just you know, looking at awe at my own recovery journey. I just look at us as a family unit. It's like, God, how do we stick together? Yeah. And my whole family should be incredibly proud of, you know, what they achieved and how they did it. And my little sister as well, 3 years younger than me, and I think she probably benefited from being in the slipstream of my recovery, but she could have easily been traumatized. But she became like a carer for me overnight at 11 years old. You know, my cousin said she had to become an adult overnight, and she just stepped up to the plate. And I talked about with her recently, and she says, you know, I don't have any trauma from that time whatsoever. And even in the hospital in Dublin, they were like, this girl's really special. And they got her little mini nurses scrubs, and she found her vocation in those moments. She went on to become a nurse and then a midwife, and now she's really senior.
Oh, wow.
Now she's really senior in the NHS and absolutely flying in her career. And she found a love for nursing and midwifery by looking after me in hospital.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
that is, and it's amazing what when you're a family unit or even friends or whatever it is, it's amazing what you can achieve when you're all kind of in it together. Yeah. Rather than it all kind of being like turmoil and everyone's like supporting each other and there's a structure there and everyone's got each other's back. Like
definitely, and you talk about the support, and there was, you know, the direct support of, you know, my family and stuff, but we were very, very lucky that we had an incredible community around us as well. So, you know, say whatever you say about the church, you know, but I was brought up Irish Catholic, and you know, I'm not practicing now. I'm way more, even more spiritual now for different reasons, but my God, like the community, the church, and the people around it, and
being a lot of support
being Irish Catholic as well, Irish immigrants. You know, you were like a pack of Irish people in South London. It's like they were, you know, you have that big Irish community as well, and I think it's a credit to what my parents are like before my accident as well, in terms of amazing members of the community that they were, in terms of helping people, and we had an open door. And I just thought it was normal that there'd always be other kids and families and kids staying over at our house and sleepovers. And a lot of the time it was that other parents were going through difficulties, and my mum would take kids in for a few days and do this and that. So they paid it forward so much without realising it before my accident, that the whole community rallied around us. So I had amazing support. My family had amazing support. And it was really special to see the community rally together. And I became a kind of like this miracle child, celebrity kid, and just basked in that glory, you know.
Why not? Why not? No, that's incredible.
Yeah,
that's incredible. So what happened next?
So then sixth form college. So again, having to like rock up to 1,200 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, and then go into a class where I didn't know anyone, and still wearing this plastic mask, and just having to overcome that. But just people are good, even teenagers, you find it. And by the end of that first term, my 2-year sentence with my mask was finished, and then I just grew so much as a person. I ended up taking 3 years to do my A levels. Like it caught up with me eventually. I shouldn't have done biology A level. I'd missed too much of the curriculum at GCSE, so I had to drop that. I knew I was too far behind. But actually, I think I needed that extra year before going to university to mature and become more comfortable in my own skin. But yeah, my confidence levels just soared, and I made like tons of friends, and yeah, I loved my time with John Ruskin. I became and I changed a lot, but I also realised that I was ready for university as well by the time I got to 19. So yeah, I got my A levels and an AS level, and
I wanted to ask you as well. Did you ever have to have like counselling or therapy around?
Oh yeah, that's that. Yeah, funny story actually. I did because we chatted a little bit about this before we came on air, and John Ruskin College that I went to insisted that I go and I've forgotten about this to this point. I go and talk to a well-being person, but that wasn't really counselling. That was just to make sure I was settling in okay, and was I being treated okay, and did I need to talk about anything. But back in the hospital in Roehampton, I'd have down days and up days, so it wasn't all kind of like I was every day gritty, determined, cheeky and funny and getting on with things and inspiring people around me. It was, there were some ups and downs, obviously, but there wasn't that much offer of counselling at that point. I think this thing called PTSD really kind of grew in the 1990s, but my mum wanted to get whatever resources she could for me, so she insisted that they try and find some counsellors, and some came in and see me. And I remember one funny occasion where this counsellor therapist came in to see me and sat down, and I'm very, very good at figuring out where people are kind of taking their knowledge from, and if I feel like they're reading from a textbook or whatever, then I can see through it quite quickly. And it's just like trauma 101, and she's like, well, you must be feeling this and you're going to be feeling that. I was like, no, I don't feel that. And I was like, no, don't try and put that in my head. I was like, I'm really sorry, but like it feels like you're reading from a textbook, and you should be getting to know me, and there's so much more about that, and that's stuck with me to this day. But after about 15 minutes, I was just like, this is just pointless. I was like, there's no point us carrying on. And my mum was still outside, stood by the nurses' station, and they were like a bit shocked that this therapist is leaving, and she just walked past them shaking her head. It's like, that kid could give me therapy. He's going to be absolutely fine.
Oh, wow.
And so I had about 15 minutes of like official therapy, I think, in my entire hospital journey. And yeah, I'm really passionate about, and that's really stuck with me to this day in terms of how we approach trauma and PTSD and mental health. And I think it's very homogenous, try to diagnose people really quickly and treat it. It's all linked back to money, whereas I think it needs to be so much more subjective. And I think we really need to get to know the person and their attributes, their skills, the culture that they come from, their background, what else have they experienced in life. And I don't think we do that enough. And I think that will become a growing passion of mine now going forward to really look into that. But no, I just didn't need it. The best therapist I ever had was my physiotherapist, and not just from the physical point of view, but Claire Clark, I think she saved me mentally, really. And
Claire Clark,
she was my physio, and I'd spend hours with her every single week. I'd have to go in 4 days a week, and my hand, just working my hands, across the table. So we were there, and we just got to know each other so well. And she, like so many other people, it's like, if you meet an athlete or this or that, it's like all you want to talk about is like what they do. So many people with me, you would be like talking about how I'm feeling, what I'm doing, but just, or what's going on, everything to do with my accident, where she just kind of taught me that life goes on, and we just talk normally. And, and it was exactly, that's the type of therapy that I needed, just to know that there was life beyond it. And with, and we've lost contact. So I'm definitely going to go and find her through this journey that I'm on now, and reconnect with her, just to tell her, like, she was the only therapy that I needed, really. And she would just like take the piss out of me constantly as well. And I loved it. It's that type of personality that I give out enough that I have to take it. And yeah, so weirdly, I think I had therapy, but I had it from just friends and family, from physiotherapists and other people, and anyone that that I was interacting with, and I was learning all the time. It didn't have to be this, one dedicated counsellor reading from a textbook. And it was just, and I was very stubborn and resilient, determined, and even at that age, I knew my own mind, and I was already finding the answers from within me. It was just, I could see that there wasn't this. No one was painting this rosy picture for a future around me. So I was like, I'm going to have to do this myself and find it. I said to my mum this year I'd realised how much further ahead I was than everyone else around me this one time when my mum found out that if burns are deep enough, you lose your hair follicles. So, and in her mind, she thought, that's right, when Mark grows up, he's going to be able to grow a beard and then he can cover a lot of the scars on his face. And I remember, her breaking that news to me, and I didn't say anything to her. I was like, she's still got a way to come. But at that point, I'd already kind of accepted this was a new me, like very early on.
Wow, that's incredible.
And that kind of, I'm just really, really lucky that I've got that inner resilience, and I think I'm blessed, and I don't want this to sound arrogant in a way, but I think I'm very lucky that I inherited like the best parts of my mum and dad, and I kind of said that to my mum, and then she came back with, well, son, I'm sorry to say this, but if I could have chosen one child to have gone through what you had to go through, I would have chosen you. And I just burst out laughing. But that's a kind of dark humour that we had to have. Yeah. We had to laugh, and me and my mum.
It kind of makes sense to me based on everything that you've just told me, because when you're telling me, like, I would have assumed that someone would have gone through crazy trauma with all of this. They would have found it very, very difficult. They would have like had to have loads of counselling. So when you're telling me what you're explaining, I'm like, this is like incredible, like, because most people would have to go through a very long journey of like healing and processing all of this.
Yeah.
And you generally had that resilience already from the offstart, which was quite a powerful trait.
Yeah, it's true. Lucky, I mean, they were obviously in the early times where why me, and all these things, but really, I've never had any PTSD, and it's just I've never woken up in cold sweats and nightmares.
It's incredible.
I can literally close my eyes and take myself back to that very spot, and I'm just looking at it objectively. It's strange, and it's and I never wanted, to be known as like special, and it's like, no, I'm not special. Just special things happen to me, and I just dealt with them, and and especially I just in the right way.
Yeah.
But I've started writing hopefully a book that will come out next year, and I've written 40,000 words over the summer, and looking back and writing and then seeing on paper, it's like, okay, kid, maybe you are a bit of an outlier. Maybe there is something a bit different here, and I want to explore that so that I can help other people. I've gotten to this point in my life.
Why is that important to you?
Because I want my journey to be. I want other people to understand their own journeys, their own traumas. They could be big T traumas like mine, or little T traumas that add up. And I want to know why I don't have PTSD, and what can we learn from that, and how can I then, by sharing my story, help people understand their own story, and I go back to the immediately trying to diagnose and put people in boxes. I just think it's too easy. It's too easy, and then it's treatable. And if it's treatable, you can make money off someone. And it's just, I think, there's loads of stories. I'm reading a story at the moment about how after the tsunami in 2004, and in Sri Lanka specifically, all these NGOs and agencies and different went in, like dozens of them, to try and treat PTSD. But they did it coming from a Western, specifically American, big pharma perspective, like, we know what we're doing coming in. And they went in and they just messed things up and treated people and got them addicted to all these sorts of medicines without understanding their culture, where they come from, how they deal with trauma in their culture. And this is a country that had been through 30 years of civil war beforehand, and they looked to each other for support. They didn't have any support. And all of a sudden, there's this we know best mentality came in, completely screwed things up. And
I think there's a lot to be said, though, about inner work, about like self-reflecting, doing the work on yourself, realizing how accountable or how responsible you are for yourself, to know that everything you do, you have a choice in what you do. so that kind of road to healing can actually start better from within rather than having to take medication and then having to deal with a load of addictions. And
Yeah, 100%. You've hit the nail on the head. And it's not that medications, there is a place for them, and some people just don't have it and can't have it. I was very lucky that I came from a very, very solid family unit,
background.
resilient background. I had parents that had left their own country to make a better life, for their children, and that's within me. Whereas someone, if I'd been in care and this had happened to me, God knows what had happened to me. So it was that inner resilience and who I was, but then it was balanced up with this incredible support unit around me.
What was a biggest lesson you feel like you could have taken from that situation that you went through?
I think you've already said it, is that the answers are on the inside. They really are. It's like I looked from within, and it's actually in the last couple of years that I've been on a bit of a spiritual journey, and I've really done the inside work to understand what my core values are. And
so talk to me about this spiritual journey, because I'm quite intrigued by this. So so you're from a Christian background, and how did that transition happen?
It's just I think I wanted to understand the way I was brought up, and the values that the church instilled in me and my family, then the values of the society that I brought up in. And I was always one of these kids beforehand, like why. So I wanted to question everything.
Me too.
And I wanted to be, I mean, I was even taught to judge the Church of England church down the end of the road. They're Christians anyway, and it's like, how do we know we've got it right and they've got it wrong? And there's all these other religions all over the world. Like, how have we got it right? Like, show me the facts. And so I started to really question, the religion. I was grateful for so much of it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to be one of these ex-smokers who then say, "Oh, I hate smoking." Yeah, it's like no.
There's a lot of good values to take from a lot of these
big time
religions, but
but I felt too judgmental. So then I went to Bristol, and I broke out of the going to church every Sunday in a small town mentality of Croydon, and met people from different backgrounds. And I shared my first uni house with someone from Greece and from China, and suddenly it was like all these people have different thought processes. And then later on I went traveling, and it just blew my mind open.
Would you say you're quite an open-minded person?
Yeah, way more now compared to the judgment. I'm extremely open-minded now, and going to Southeast Asia, and I really that's my kind of region of the world that I feel most attached to in terms of kind of spiritual thinking and Eastern philosophies. And I think there's so much that goes back thousands of years.
How do you feel like that open-mindedness has kind of served you moving forward? How do you think it's helped you in more ways than you can imagine? Like, what have you taken from it?
I think it's just made me much calmer, much less judgmental, and it's about doing the inside work on yourself. And excuse me, and it's incredible if once you start not caring about like what other people are doing and allowing them to annoy you and feel like you need to fix everyone. I turned all the focus on myself, and it's like, if I can become the best version of me, if I can have really good values and morals, and it's about me being sort of quite selfish and self-centered, but without the ego. So with a raised level of consciousness. So if you can be compassionate and caring and empathetic, and because that's what you like doing, then that's a really, really nice place to get to as a person. So my barometer in terms of how I'm feeling is if I get road rage or not. Right. So if I'm driving along, and I used to get angry at people all the time, people are shouting, and if people are, middle lane wankers and all this kind of stuff, and it'd be like, I felt like it was my duty to tell them, to educate them and do this and that. And like, what does it matter? Like, life goes on. And if you see someone doing something, just do it. Like, try and change the world by inspiring people, by being the best person that you can be, and have an aura about you. And then people learn from that. and take your ego, out of the situation. I've really got into meditation in the last really only 9 months that I've finally stuck with it. And the biggest lesson I've learned from meditation is not, I used to think like a lot of people that you meditate and then you go into the Zen state for however long you're doing it. It's not about that. Constantly your thoughts,
self-reflection,
your thoughts are attacking you, and it's realizing when those thoughts are in play and then move away from it. So then if you can take that lesson and apply it to everyday life, I now realize because we all have an ego and we can't be egoless. That's just, it's a myth, it's a fantasy. But if you can train your consciousness to know when your ego is in play or whether your true self is in play, it transcends you as a person. It really does. It's transcendent for me. And it's, so now more and more and more by practicing meditation and with my life experiences and wisdom and all that, I realize now more and more when my ego is in play and I can let it go. So I go into a conversation or a debate or whatever, and I have no interest in being right. I have interest in getting to the crux of the conversation and whatever that may be. And to free yourself of needing to be right. And so often we do that. I look back and I used to be so competitive, and you get into a discussion about something, and then all of a sudden it's more important that I come out of this discussion being right and I prove you wrong than us actually getting to the core of the issue that we're talking about. So yeah, kind of spirituality led to that, led to meditation, led to understanding myself better when my ego was in play, and realizing that self-care is the most important thing. But again, as I said, doing it with a raised level of consciousness. Otherwise you become a narcissist and you become arrogant and it's all about you. But if you have this self-awareness and compassion and empathy, and then you put yourself first, then that's a really, really good place to be in. My old business partner, she used to say to me that, people pleasing is so boring. And we laud people, and it's, eulogies and stuff where it's like, they were a very selfless person. They gave themselves to everyone else. It's like, that is not a good thing. Like, just if you're doing that.
Why?
Well, because it's not a good thing automatically if it's all about context, right? So if you're doing it after you've put yourself first, and this is something that you want to be doing, that's a good thing. But if you're emptying yourself constantly for other people and you're not doing the self-care on yourself, then it's not a good thing. So many people in stressful career choices and stuff end up turning to self-medicating and alcohol and stuff like that because they're giving themselves to people all the time that they're not looking after themselves. I love the analogy of putting an oxygen mask on yourself, in the plane before you put it on other people. And that's so key. You've got to put the oxygen mask on yourself and put it on other people. And that's, I'll then take that back to...
I used to be a bit like that, to be honest with you, a bit of a people pleaser. And I think the hard transition for me was transitioning into somebody that needed to look after himself more.
Yeah.
Because everybody around you was always used to the people pleasing boundary. So, when you change, it's hard for yourself, but then it's probably hard for people around you. But it is very necessary because I'm going to stop using it, but you can't look after other people unless you're the best version of yourself anyway.
Big time.
So I think there's a lot to be said about making sure that you're in the best headspace you can be.
Yeah.
So that when you are around people, that you're supplying that good energy around them. Otherwise, what's it all about? Is it you feeding all the negativity, or are you feeding all the positivity?
Big time. And I think it's, we need to have, rather than judge people, have a bit more empathy. So some people can think you're being selfish and, apathetic, but it might be that you just, you need to, do some self-care. And you need to have that solid foundation as a person. And then from that solid foundation, you're going to be in a much stronger position to help other people. But if you don't do that first, you're going to be on unstable ground, and at some point, something's going to happen, some trauma in your life, and that ground beneath you, if it's not solid, it's gonna explode, crumble. It's gonna crumble, exactly, and then you're no good to anyone at all. So it's super important that we understand this, I think, going forward. And I've had to understand it through. I wish that there had been a less painful way to enlightenment, but it is what it is. I've only got my story, my journey, and I'm learning what I can from it, and then trying to share it in a way now that hopefully other people can just relate that to their own stories. And you only have your own story. You can't have anyone else's. So it's stop looking to other people, stop looking to the outside world, work on the inside work. I had to, go back to what I said before, there wasn't a very bright picture painted for me. And I'd look out into the world and it's like, how am I going to fit into this? So therefore I had to find validation inside, internal validation, and finding that internal validation and not needing it from other people is a great place.
You had to be your own beacon of hope, essentially, rather than rely on other people to give it to you. Yeah. Which is like the strongest source where you can get it from anyway, because anything that you create internally for yourself anyway is probably the most strongest. Yeah. If you rely too much on other people to supply you something, then guess what? That's only limited, isn't it? So
exactly. And, the things, in the last 30 years as well with social media and everything else, it's become more and more and more about external validation and clicks and likes and, this fake world that we see, through these various different apps, that it's getting harder and harder and harder. Yeah, we're constantly looking for other people to get that validation, and it's just not good for people's mental health. So it's not surprising that we're seeing more and more people, suffer with, anxiety and lots of different depression and lots of other different, not mental illnesses, but different mental struggles in life, because it's an outside-in way of thinking, and we need to reverse that and have an inside-out way of thinking.
Yeah, I think with social media, like, it is rapidly evolved and changed over the years in our generation, and it's not going anywhere. And I think a lot of it's said you either don't use it at all, you use it in a responsible way, or there's the toxic side of using it where, it creates problems for themselves or other people. Yeah. And, I think what it is, we need to really be adjusting to being responsible when we're using. So use it for the right reasons, make sure you're conscious of when you're using it and why you're using it. Yeah. And be careful of, if there's too much negativity happening at that period of time, then take yourself out of it. Yeah. Don't get too hung up on the wrong stuff for social media, because there is a lot of good on social media, that it can be used for the right reasons, and it can get your message out there, and it can give you an opportunity. Yeah. So you've got to just be that responsible sort of person when using these things, to make sure it doesn't turn into an obsession of something quite toxic, shall I say.
Yeah, that's totally true. But the problem we have, and especially now with like AI coming in, and TikTok is the first social media platform that really has this like AI powered algorithm, and it's, I worry that we're so detached, malleable still that these algorithms can make or break your day, in terms of I just don't want to be a slave to the algorithms. And because there's so much power within so few people within that space, be it up to the Chinese government or your Zuckerbergs or your Musks or whatever, it kind of worries me that it's
the information that they're feeding people.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done to have control over it, but it's just mobile phones and these apps are just so powerful, and they're powerful to younger minds that are still very, very malleable. And I said that earlier, that I'm in one way it's horrific that I was burned at 14, but another way, because I was still going through puberty and developing as a person, I was able to use everything that I went through to really build these strong character blocks that have led me through life. So if you're now going to apply the uncertainty and the external validation and this outside-in way of thinking into these algorithms, and then put them, in a mobile phone in the palm of a 13-year-old girl or boy, it's like suddenly you're impacting their minds at the most crucial stage, that you might hardwire certain way of thinking that stays with them for the rest of their life. So that's the real worry for me for social media. Yes, there's brilliant sides to it as well. You can find your tribe. You realize that there are other people out there like you. You can become your more authentic self quicker when you realize that just because there's no one in your village or your town like you, it doesn't mean there aren't people out there in the world like you. So that's the really good side of it. Anyone can become someone through it. You know, someone like yourself can build like this amazing podcast and find an audience that, God, that would have been impossible to do 2 decades ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Starting a newspaper or a magazine and doing interviews, it would have been so much harder to get that distribution out there. So
all I know is that it's here to stay, and it's definitely not going anywhere.
No.
And you either use the tools in the right way for in the healthiest way possible, which is you know, a lot easier said than done for sure. But or it's just stay out of social media altogether, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that's the other option. Doesn't mean you haven't got a social life, but I think with social media, like, we can show people whatever we want them to see.
Yeah.
Like, so it works in all different. It works for everybody. So if everybody, it's all smoke and mirrors. This is why I like podcasts, because for me this is just an authentic chat. This is just us having a conversation about your life, what you went through, how you grew through that. And for me, it's not like we're trying to pretend to be someone that we're not, because this actually happened. Like, this is what you went through. Yeah. So I really enjoy stuff like this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, just, you know, we all, you know, who we are, and just be, if you can get to the place where you can be your authentic self, it's so calming. It's just like, you know,
it's too much hard work to try and be someone that you're not, isn't it, all the time?
It really is. Yeah, just be like, I'm just so much less angry, so much less, I'm just like, whatever, just you know, be like water. It's like Bruce Lee.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So what's next for you, Mark?
So next for me is just about to embark on a speaking career. I'm writing my book. I just tell you, you know, the kind of way I've lived my life is, I got to university, and I remember closing the door to my front door, my halls, to my mum and dad, and I stood there in the hallway, and I got this all over body reaction, like every single like hair on my body stood up, and I remember just standing there and closing my eyes and was like, "You've done it, kid. You've actually made it." It's like that one big target for me I told you about before was getting my independence back. And that was the moment I got it back. And for me, that was like an athlete getting to the starting blocks. And it took a hell of a lot of work and training to be able to, you know, put the shoes on, put the spikes on, get to it. And then from that moment, it was like I was running into life. So rather than me running away from my traumas, I felt that the universe had taken so much away from me that I was going to go and get mine back. And whatever adventure that took me on, and you know, it would take me on, and that started in that moment. And over the years, you know, my mum would always said to me, you know, when are you going to write a book? You know, when are you going to do that? And you know, so and so just said to me, God, it's like that kid's already living for the second time. It's like, when are you going to share your wisdom? And I was like, I'm not ready, because I was running into life, adventures, traveling, you know, getting into poker, becoming a poker commentator. Just starting a business.
How did that happen, by the way?
I'll just finish off this little bit, and then we'll go back. And then at the beginning of last year, so the beginning of 2021, I'd been running a video production company for 5 years and realised that this I needed to live a more purpose-led life. I needed to do whatever. But when you're running an agency, it's all-consuming, and there was no space left in my brain to think of anything else. So I came back at the beginning of the year, and I said to my senior management team, I was like, I think I've taken this as far as I can go. I think I need to spread my wings. I don't know what that is, but I need to go and explore it. And pretty quickly they were like, yeah, we feel like you're ready to do it. And I was like, oh, well, you know, you could have fought for me a bit harder. But anyway, so I went off to Wales on my own for 3 weeks, and I journaled and I read and I walked through like the woods and waterfalls. And the only thing they asked me to do was put a few videos up on LinkedIn, just first time ever recording stuff, the camera, walking around, and just me sharing my thoughts, being my authentic self on camera, whatever came to me. And they just blew up and went really well. And I was like, okay, I think, you know, got a voice here. And then I felt in such a good place, and I, you know, still didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I was driving out of Wales, and in my car, and second time in my life I got that all over body reaction. It was 25 years later, and I was like, huh, okay. And so I was thinking about it, and I worked out in my mind that I was done running into life, that I'd evened up the score, that my whole way of dealing with my trauma was to go out and even it up and just, right, university's taken so much away from me. I'm gonna fill it with opportunities and fun and can do. And I did that, and I described it before as like almost like Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump when he's running across country and then suddenly gets to
Braces.
a point and he goes, huh. He stops.
Oh, right.
When he's running with the longer
that's
hair.
Right. Yeah.
And
He's I'm gonna go home now.
and he's like, I'm going home now. and I was like, for me, it was like, I'm ready now. I'm ready to turn around and look back and really look back. And when I turned around, not only did I see this incredible life that I live and all these things that I've achieved, one of them being poker that we'll get to in a second, I also look back at all the people that I'd gathered like along the way. And it was just like a sea of people, that friends, colleagues, people that I'd, positively impacted, inspired over their life. And it was like, wow, you've got a lot of people to help you here, and a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom, and you can help people. And I was like, okay, now I'm ready to share my story. And I rang my mum on the way home. I think I was on the M1 or something. And I said to her, like, I'm ready now to do that. She goes, oh, son, I've been waiting for this phone call for like 20 or 30 years. It's like, you have to get out there and, share your story. And to hear that from mum was lovely. I nearly crashed the car off. I'm glad I was in the slow lane. But yeah, and so for the last 18 months, I tried to set up I was in a process set up another company, but then realised it wasn't for me. But it was all around mindset and retreats, and I had incredible co-founders. But it turned out that was just the final piece in the jigsaw I needed. I had all this life experience and stuff to share, but I didn't necessarily have the words and the structure and to be able to help people apply it. When we talked about, inner values and level of consciousness and raising all that, they're sort of stuff that I learned with Nicole and Arunjay, two incredible people that I went on a journey with. But then I knew I needed to break out on my own. So I'm doing that this year. But circling back round. So I was drifting a bit in my 20s. I travelled loads around the world, and then I was back home from my travels and just got introduced to the game of poker by some friends. And I played with them, and I'd sort of beat them each time. And I played a lot of cards growing up, and I've got a very strategic mind. And I was like, I'll just put $20 online and I turned that into 100 in a week, and then 3,000 within a month, and then 30,000, and it was just like, oh, okay, I'm pretty good at this game. But I got a bit obsessed by it, and my friend said I became boring, and I was in a relationship at the time, and she loved it to start with, and then didn't like it, and excuse me. But already by then I could see that there was these. So I was on the cusp of the poker industry when there was the old school gambler with the cigars and the Stetson hats and shady and backroom saloons. And then the internet new wave coming through, where there's all these young mathematicians who would play hundreds of thousands of hands online and analyze the data. And by this point, I was in my mid to late 20s, and I already knew that the young wave coming through were going to completely change the game. So I thought, well, this is an industry that's going somewhere. I'll start using my skills of communication and start writing about it. Start guesting on this blog, and then all of a sudden, I'm like immediately working on the European Poker Tour, which is. It's like writing about football and then going immediately to the Champions League. And there was hardly anyone doing this at the time, live tournament reporting. And it was a part-time thing. I was playing on the side. I'm still hoping to make it big. Never happened. But then the industry just exploded in Europe. And all of a sudden, there was loads of demand for writers. And next thing I know, I'm just traveling like all over Europe writing about it. And then I go to Las Vegas in the summer. And then live streams started coming about in terms of like videos. It used to be late night Channel 4, and that used to be the thing, and some live written blogs. But then with broadband coming about, the industry exploded, and I was just in the right place at the right time. And all of a sudden, and then they realised that some of the people who ran these tours, this kid's got a bit of a big mouth, and as you might have realised, everyone over the last hour, and so I started guesting, doing poker commentary, and then loved it, and just started doing that. So I spent 10-15 years just flying around the world writing and talking about the biggest poker tournaments, and it meant I could continue to travel. I was staying in amazing hotels. I'd had like backpacking trips on the edge. It was a fantastic lifestyle for over a year, for over a decade. And, you know, it was play hard, work hard. I got to meet loads of celebrities and crazy parties, and it was just a wild ride, man. It was brilliant. Yeah.
You've definitely had a colourful life.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's been fun. So yeah, it's that, you know, people like look at me and they often pity me, and it's like, well, dude, I'm pitying you. It's like, you know, I wouldn't swap it for anything. It's like, yes, there's been hard times, but I can't change it. But you know, I talked to, you know, my cousin who was directly involved in my accident this year, and you know, he was racked with a lot of guilt because it was, you know, coin flip, and poker is a lot about coin flips. You know, you put the cards in 50-50, and it was a coin flip between who was on what side of, you know, the garage. And I'm just so glad it was me and not him. And, you know, he had to deal with a lot of guilt. But then more recently, I think he's been coming around and healing in his own way, and being like that, well, if you change certain things, like what's your life going to end up like? And he's got a beautiful wife and 2 incredible children, and he's incredibly happy. And I'm so proud of the person he's become, despite the mental trauma that he's had to go through. And then he did say to me, he's like, oh, you know, yeah, I never saw you one, Marc, as someone who wanted a boring life. And I think my life could have been mundane and boring, whereas, you know, despite of all the turmoil and trauma I've had to go through, it's just been a wild ride, and I wouldn't swap it for anything.
It looks like you're destined for some great things, Marc, to be fair. So
I hope so. I feel like I'm just getting started now.
Yeah.
But this feels like, as much as I love the poker, I'd hit a glass ceiling, and I didn't want to join any of the gaming companies for kind of more moral reasons, because there's obviously some grey areas and a bit of shadiness, and as there is when there's any industry with loads of cash around. So that's when I jumped into the video production company, but then I, you know, then jumped from that when I wasn't right. So I'm not afraid to make changes and just throw myself in there and then figure it out. And I've always figured it out. Like I've had to at some points, you know, when my back's against the wall and fighting for my life. So anything that comes after that is
child's play.
Is child's play. And now I'm throwing myself into this world of podcasting and public speaking and writing my book, and never done any of that really before. But I feel ready for it, and I'm really looking forward to you know, where this journey goes.
It sounds super exciting, to be fair, mate. Well, all I can say is, you know, thank you so much for being here today, and like really in sharing your insights. And yeah, it was incredible. So thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me. You're a great company and a great conversationalist, and create a very safe space for people to share, which is important. And I just hope anyone listening can kind of apply some of what I've said to their own journeys, and, you know, feel a bit more positive and resilient, and do the inside work and find that validation from within, and don't worry so much, and people pleasing is boring.
Top man, all the best. Brilliant. And we'll keep in touch
for sure.
Cheers.
Thank you.